Yes, I'm Jake Prager. My question is, at the moment, the current ground is owned by AFC Wimbledon Limited, I believe?
No.
No. Okay. Could you just say who owns the current ground? Who will
Eric Samuelson Incorporated.
Who will own the new ground? And what happens to the shareholders of AFC Wimbledon Limited, of which I'm one?
No, you're not.
I'm not, sorry.
No.
Well, what am I a shareholder of?
I'm not going to tell you. I tend to probably not very helpfully describe the structure of the current club as sort of armless torso. So at the top, the head, is the Dons Trust. And the body is the PLC, and each leg is football at AFC Wimbledon at FCW Stadium. And guess which one owns the stadium? So FCW Stadium owns the stadium. AFC Wimbledon Football Club does pretty well everything else. And the PLC sits in the middle because we used that many years ago to have a share issue to raise funds to buy the stadium. And then the Dons Trust owns that. So, and PLC owns 100% of stadium and football. So you will have shares in the PLC, and because you're here tonight, you also have a share in the Dons Trust. That's how things are. The reason the stadium is in AFCW Stadium is that we were advised to do that by the lawyers. I think, especially in the aftermath of what had happened to WFC, that in the event that the club went under, at least the stadium would be protected, or it would have a better chance of being protected from being lost. I'm not sure how effective that would be legally, but it was an attempt to do that. Because of the way that works, the only business AFCW Stadium does is, in order to comply with the Football League, it licenses the stadium to AFC Wimbledon. It has to do that because the PLC tells it to. It's got no choice. So it sits there making losses every year, and probably the simplest thing to do when you own a new stadium is put it in a brand new company, which will be another leg to the PLC. It'll be 100% owned, it sits underneath the PLC. And that's the advice from our tax people, although we haven't finalised that. That's the advice that we've been given. We've got to go through the ramifications of doing that, get legal advice on whether that makes sense, take it to the Dons Trust board to get them to approve it. But in case we need to do that, we've already set up a company in which it would sit. Paul's giggling. Can't imagine why, Paul. And that company's called the Wider Interest of Football Limited. Which seems like a good name. It can always be changed if people don't like it. But that's what that is. If you've noticed that being created, that's what it's sitting there for. In the event that when we build a new stadium, the legal advice and the tax advice is it's better to put it in there, and we make the case to the Dons Trust board, that's the way it needs to be done. So that's...
And if,
really long answer.
If we sell more shares, how does that work with the existing shareholders?
If we sell more shares, that would only be in the PLC, I think, in the body that owns 100% of the football club, so you wouldn't be losing any of that. I have given that some thought, but I haven't really explored the issues in any detail with the Dons Trust board. But my personal view is if we did do that, we want to do it on the same basis as the last time we issued shares, which is that the Dons Trust must own at least 75% of the shares and in effect remain in pretty well absolute control of the football club. I don't get to make those decisions, but my personal view is anything more than that would be giving away too much. And that's a view I'd express strongly, but it's not something we've debated yet.
Yeah, it's one of the slides early on where you've got the temporary seating. It looked to me as though that wasn't undercover. Was that the case or not?
No, it's not. I don't have time to answer that.
It may have just been the way I saw it.
Well, if it's any consolation, you weren't the only one who thought that. It is undercover, and we're trying to make sure that the drip line, as we affectionately call it, is ahead of you, so you stay dry. They are covered.
Eric, Matt Lowndes. You mentioned safe standing earlier. Is it purely an economic decision whether we have that or not, assuming we have the money? Because I remember before you said that we took some funding from the authorities for here and you were hoping to transfer it over? Is it purely an economic thing, whether we can have that or not?
No, it's a decision that I think is one that ought to be taken with great circumspection and shouldn't be made solely on economic grounds alone if people feel strongly about it. I think what's important on a big decision like that, to not have standing or to have standing, it's so important. I personally think we need to take that to the members, and Matt's nodding. The issue, for those of you who are not familiar, is that we have £750,000 worth of grants here which are repayable when we sell this stadium. In principle, it's possible to take those grants with us to the new stadium, but only if it's an all-seater stadium. That's the rules. Obviously what I'd like to do is be able to say we can take those grants with us whether we build an all-seater stadium or not. And what I'm in conversations with the Football Stadium Improvement Fund that we were awarded the grant, which will go a bit more formal soon, which says we will commit right now to building an all-seater stadium, but if we change our mind, we understand we have to pay the grants back, so it actually leaves all the decision open. But if in the interim it becomes allowed to have standing, then we will be coming back to you to say, can we take the grants with us anyway?
If you have the seat flat down, is that considered all-seater?
Safe standing, which means, or rail seating as they call it, is not considered to be all-seater stadium. It doesn't, so that wouldn't qualify. We can't do that and say it's an all-seater stadium. Personally, I don't like it either, but that's no. What's my opinion got to do with it? It's not. I want to stand safely, not have safe standing. Personal opinion.
It's Mr. Nangler again.
Oh, sorry. Just to make clear, the temporary seating is currently included in the fitting out elements, so there is a little bit of time for decisions to be made and choices to be made, deliberately so. It's one of the reasons we kept it out, so there is a chance to revisit that without disrupting the construction process.
It's Mr. Nangler again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nangler again. What about the old, regarding funding, what about the old proverbial raffle ticket or something? Now, every year when the Naval Association that I'm in or something, they sent us some raffle books, 4 raffle books, 20 quid, twice a year. I mean, it may not be much, and you don't have to offer £1 million for first prize. You could just do 1,000 quid or something like that. That will help pay for the stewards at the football matches. Have we considered that something?
First of all, I'm not the chairman. I'm the chief executive. I don't mean to be picky about it, but that is my job. The only chairman in the room that I'm aware of is Matt, who's chairman of the Dons Trust. But that's just for the record. A raffle, yeah, we can do that. We've looked into doing something a bit more national with a really big prize. We looked at that a few years ago. The trouble is you get into quite severe licensing difficulties, or complications rather than difficulties. And also, you have to be satisfied there's enough people out there who are going to sell the tickets for you. The Naval Association, well, how many people are associated with that? As opposed to how many people from AFC Wimbledon are going to try and sell raffle tickets. I think you have to look at the scale of what we can do, and the personal view is there's a very limited number of things we can ask our fans to do. I'm not sure I'd put that as one of the top ones in terms of everything else we will be asking them to do. But we revisit it regularly. The last time we talked about it in the football club was about a year ago. It's not a no, it's just it doesn't feel as if it's top of our priorities right now.
It's a tax question.
Goody.
Are we going to be liable to a capital gain on the disposal of Kings Meadow? And if so, would we be able to roll it over into the acquisition of New Power Lane?
The answers are yes and yes.
Good.
Very simply for people, if you sell something, if you sell a capital asset, which is what the stadium is, for more than you paid for it, after allowing for the extra money you spent on it, like building the Jim Green stand, then you pay capital gains tax on it as a company, and we would have to do that. But if you use the money to reinvest in similar assets, simply, then you can have something called rollover relief, which means you only pay the tax when you sell the next asset. So when we come to sell Plough Lane, we'd have to pay the tax unless we were then going to invest in yet another stadium in in Plough Lane X where the flats used to be. Maybe something like that. So, in short, we've taken tax advice on this from our auditors, BDO. We will have to disclose to the revenue in the year in which we complete the deal, which is this financial year, about to start in July. We'll have to tell the revenue then, and as long as we do that, as long as we spend the money within 3 years, which if we don't, I don't know where we're going to be playing, we're fine.
Hi there. I was reading a few weeks ago on the ever-reliable Evening Standard website that apparently AFC Wimbledon, outside of the money they paid the Costa family for Kingsmeadow originally, so that was a few years ago, apparently when Kingstonian left, they also gave them a £1 million goodwill payment. Is that true?
We haven't paid any money. Well, no, that's not true. We have. There's two parts to this. Kingstonian are legally entitled to a payment to terminate the licence here. That's just a deal. It's written in the contract, and there's a formula depending on how many years there are left for them to play here for nothing. That's a sum that's calculated. That's been paid. There's then a donation that is being paid to them, which we've not made public. We've just said it's a very substantial fee. We've not made public as part of an agreement with Kingstonian, partly because in negotiations they want to have about building a new stadium, they don't especially want to tell people how much money they've got. They'll just get pursued, I think it's a word I could use politely, a bit harder for their funds. But yes, we are making a substantial contribution to them. I believe this was brought to a meeting for a vote here. And the reason is, we think, my explanation of this is the best chance Kingstonian will ever have to have ownership of part or all of their own ground. Something they could never have done here. They couldn't have afforded to run this ground if we'd given it to them. That's their own words. So this is their best chance of a win-win. They get the money to contribute towards building a new stadium to part of development, like we're doing, or to buy a share in an existing stadium. And I personally think that's the right way we should behave as a club.
Sure. I mean, I suppose I was just asking in terms of, we've been talking a lot about funding and how we can fund the new stadium, new players, etc., etc., etc. If we don't have to do something, is it really the best use of our funds? I realise obviously you've got the moral argument, but in terms of the commercial argument, is it the best use of our funds to give money to Kingstonian when obviously we've got everything else in the background?
That's a good argument, and a debate we had before and voted on it, which is not a polite way of saying be quiet, but the debate's been had and it's been voted on. I don't think we could now actually reverse the decision, the agreement we've entered into as a result of that debate. So it becomes academic. If you think we shouldn't be spending that money, I'm afraid we're committed to it. If you think the people who advocated it, and that includes me, not the only one, are idiots for doing so, well, yeah, fine. I can live with that.
At the end of the day, you own the club, so to speak, so
That's George.
That's true.
I'll pay.
I say keep it moving.
Only one question, parking. Because all around there is all residential parking.
Okay, right. Yes, parking. There are very few parking spaces in the stadium at the first stage, 20 odd to be precise, although I'm going to have to tell someone my password. Never mind. Inside the stadium, when it's built, there will be, in the first stage, oh, here comes Amanda sorted. There will be 20 odd parking spaces. When the 20,000 is built, there'll be 70 odd. There'll also be space when the outspread.
Oh no, turn it on, turn it off.
Is that what you've done, Jim? Is that what you did, Jim?
No, just have to turn it off. You have to turn it back on.
It is on. Anyway, there will be space on certain match days to put a few more cars in if there's no outside broadcast unit there, and that's probably most match days. As for parking nearby, what's been imposed upon us, you don't know that. If he knows the password, I'm going to be distraught.
Let's not reveal that then.
I've got my glasses on.
Password 123.
Fly, my beauties, fly.
Yeah.
I'm going to find the...
Yeah, Andrew will show you where you might park your car if you let him.
Just on the middle.
There's a space here where the outside broadcast unit will go on a match day, which usually won't be full, so there's some extra spaces, but most of the parking will be behind the south stand. But it won't be much. I was at the Oval recently talking to the chief executive there, and he says on a match day they have about 20 parking spaces. The players park in the local school and just walk across the road. Not unique, it's obviously it's desirable. In the local streets, we have employed some traffic consultants, or Galliard did, to do a survey to see what the parking position was like. And actually there were more than enough parking spaces available between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock on a Saturday, they found, in the local streets. Local residents don't believe that, but that's the situation. What I think is likely to happen in practice is, first of all, we will have to do a survey before we get too much further down the line on what the level of parking is on a match day. Then sometime after we've been operating the stadium, we'll do another survey to see if it's become intolerable. And it might be they create what's called a controlled parking zone, which will make it difficult to park. And you'll have to travel by public transport. The local schools will make some money. They'll be able to take car parks and bicycle parking. But yes, the majority of people will have to go by public transport, and I realise that's difficult for some. But that's the way it is with modern stadia. I don't think there's very many nowadays where there's lots of parking. But it should be possible to park locally. So we're told.
Eric, I think this would probably apply to you. In the funding, I believe that the construction of the pitch is completely separate to Galliard.
Yes.
Is that included in the funding and loans that we've already arranged?
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, and I'm making these numbers up so they're completely fictitious so that no one's going to believe them, but suppose the stadium's going to cost £500,000 to build and the FF money are going to cost £100,000, well, we've got the money set aside for both of those, provided we get the Galliard money, the Chelsea money and the bank loan. That's all in there, including a pitch. What type of pitch we build will partly depend on what funds we've got and how much of a priority we want to make to making the pitch one of the very best, which is a Deso pitch or equivalent, whether we just want a high quality pitch. We'll decide nearer the time, we don't have to decide now. Be better than what we've got here, although you should see this season's pitch, it's looking very good.
The good news is we've timed our run to the line pretty well in terms of pitches. Deso were a Dutch outfit, produce a pitch called the Deso Grassmast, which is what you see at places like Wembley and Twickenham, and they are very durable and very good. In the last 12 months or so, there have been 2 or 3 other pitch options come to the market, which have very kindly been tested for us for a season or 2, and I think we will probably be able to get the benefit of the competition in the marketplace on pitches and get ourselves a pretty good pitch for a reasonable price.
Sorry, going back to the parking issue. Personally, I think that anyone who is capable of using public transport should do so. But disabled people. There are a lot of people who you could describe as ambulant disabled. That's a term that was used by someone I know who has a disability, who probably has the ability to walk from the station or to get a bus. There are a few people who cannot walk far at all, and we're not accommodating them for parking. Alice, for instance.
Well, there's 2 parts to this. I'll answer the first part of it. Whoever we choose not to accommodate for parking, we're going to get the same sort of challenge. We're not looking after them. For example, the officials can't park in the ground, really? So there's 20 odd spaces, we have to allocate them as best as we can and make sense. The team won't be parking there, the team will have to come in by a coach, probably from the training ground or somewhere else they'll meet. But that's yet to be decided in the operating plan. It will be possible for severely disabled people to be dropped off just outside the main entrance to the ground, which is where most of them will probably need to be. But if you are But that will not solve everybody's problem. In the end, we can't. We're no different from various other grounds where this happens. It will be possible to be dropped off, and you'll have to make arrangements for that to happen. We cannot accommodate all the people who are disabled and cannot walk far enough. It's physically not possible in this stadium. This really can't be done.
Just from a technical point of view, there are legal obligations on the number of disabled parking spaces you have to provide within the total number that you've got. So within 20 odd spaces, there is a prescribed number of disabled spaces that you will have to provide, and we will provide those. As Eric said, just on Bow Lane, we've part of the what we call the 278 works. They're works that are attached to the planning condition. There will be a drop-off bay which will be available to be used by disabled people, dropping people off, and we will have to steward them into the stadium from there. So we have thought about it. We know we've got to deal with it.
It's a contentious issue, but when they come to us, which will probably happen when we're in the new stadium at one stage or another. This season we had to, well, I say we had to, but we had these situations in place where the coach would be there and, you know, hidden out of the way. And has that also been taken into account for the north stand being the away stand, for them having a way of getting the F out of Dodge when the match is done?
Yeah, go on, yours.
It's probably easier for me to answer. Those who shall not be named. The access to the away fans is just off. So if you, there is a little road that comes down the side of this new block here and comes into the north stand. That is where the away fans will get into. That's the only way they will be able to get into the stand. I'm sure with them arriving, it will be ticket only. They will be bussed in, dropped off at the top of that road. They will be walked into the stadium and then walk back to the buses afterwards, and the buses will go and be discreetly lost during the match. So yes, we do realise, and it's not just them, it's actually a requirement for pretty much any sports ground now. You have to have anticipate that you might get some unfriendly fans arriving or some rivalries that need management, and therefore you have to have a plan in place that we part of the operational plan as well. Do you want us to add any more?
No, that's fine. I mean, they'll go quietly like they did this time if we beat them. And we will.
We've just got to beat them.
Of course we will. Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Two questions. Will we have a dedicated Don's Trust office, and will there be a trophy room? Thank you.
I would not have decided really. The Don's Trust, no, we've just not decided. We've not got into that level of detail. That's not to say yes or no. I think it's a case of what's the trophy room. Take the trophy room rather than the Don's Trust one, because they're all sitting there and I don't want to put them off. The trophy room, well, do you want a trophy room, or do you want the trophies a bit more visible, strewn around the stadium, so that wherever you are in the stadium you pass a trophy that we've won? And maybe you move them around from cabinet to cabinet. I don't know. I personally don't have a strong feeling, but normally, if you had a trophy room, my guess is that it wouldn't get visited very often. But if you have them on public display, a bit like in the lobby down there, maybe people won't stop and look at them, but they're there if you want to. So I think someone asked earlier about input into how the stadium is dressed and organised. That's something we should discuss. As for a Don's Trust office, if they need one, there'll have to be a way of finding some space somewhere. It'll have to be somewhere useful, and that's the real difficulty in that stadium. What are you trying to do with it? But maybe, if there's a good case to be made, and it trumps the other cases.
Eric, in your list of means of raising money, I noticed that you didn't have there a sponsor for naming of the stadium, which could raise quite a lot of money, and also the money which we're going to give to Kingstonian. When have we actually got to give them that money?
Okay, the sponsor for the stadium, one of the documents I'm sending off for due diligence is the operating budget for the new stadium, and that assumes that, suppose we got, again, nonsense money, £20,000 a year for naming rights, that's been put into the budget for each year, rather than 10-year deal, £200,000 up front. I would prefer to do that if we possibly can, because we want to make sure that we're able to spend it on the team and on other things around the stadium. So you could conceivably trade in a 10-year deal at £20,000 a year, but actually you'd probably only get about £12,000 for it in capital up front because of interest rates and net present values and all that sort of stuff. It would be better if we can find the funds from other sources, not to spend naming rights money on that. I do apologise, I'm just having trouble remembering two-part questions tonight. The second part was about...
When we got actually pay Kingstonian, the money we promised we could...
Well, when you have to pay Kingstonian, that's laid down in the deal. We have to pay them a chunk. We have to pay them to kill the licence. That's not the right expression. We need to finalise the licence and legally to end the licence. That's the expression I was looking for. We then have to pay them the further substantial sum of money, which we're paying in 2 instalments, one of which is due shortly after, an undetermined date, but shortly after they open an escrow account. And an escrow account for a simple-minded man like me is a place where the money will sit and can only be spent on Kingstonian things if everybody's agreed that's the sort of things it should be spent on, not on holidays for the team or that sort of thing. It has to be spent on stuff towards the club, a new stadium, that sort of thing. So the first tranche should be paid. The second amount will be paid when we, at the same time as you get the land. And effectively we're moving out of here. That's when that will be paid.
Andrew ended his presentation with a joke about what league we're in is the only unanswered question. I'm curious how sensitive the plans are about where our position is. You know, in a couple of years we could be 2 up, 2 down, anywhere in between, and a few years beyond. I'm curious how much that affects the financials or any other conditions that we attached to the deal.
Okay, Andrew said he'll choking up with emotion here. He'll do the technical and I'll do the financial. The operating budget that I've done sets out what would happen if we were relegated, because any sensible lender would want to know, how can you manage that? The answer is yes. I've assumed a decrease in the crowds. We're not actually thinking a brand new stadium would go down that much, but you have to assume that. I've built in, like most clubs, the players' contracts have built in reduction clauses into their pay if you get relegated. That's easily dealt with. If we get promoted, that's a dream. I'm not too worried about that. I did some back-of-the-envelope sums to tell Neil how much money we'd be able to spend on players if we were to be promoted in the Championship, and if we were able to spend all the increased central funds we got and nothing else on players. And he seemed content with what I thought we'd be. What you probably aren't aware of is it doesn't work exactly like this, but the TV and broadcast money and all the other stuff that comes in, not all the other stuff, that sort of money that comes into the league from Sky for the league's deal, not the Premier League deal, is split 80-20, 80-12-8. 80% goes to the Championship, 12 to League One, and only 8% to League Two. They get a tenth of what the Championship does. So we're getting 12% at the moment. It would go 6 2/3 times in the Championship. We would still be one of the lowest spending clubs probably, but that's what Wimbledon does, doesn't it? We'll be fine. The real one to look at hard, and the one I've looked at very hard, is what happens if we're relegated, and I'm very confident we're fine. Technically, handing over to Andrew.
One of the advantages of using the relocatable stuff around the northeast and south stands is that it's modular, it's flexible, and you can increase it and decrease it. You do have to have a little bit of time to procure it and organise it, but the market is a lot more mature now with things like the Olympics and Commonwealth Games and World Cups that move around the world, and there's quite a big market, what is called overlay. And it just comes, but you can keep it for a period of time. There is a tipping point at which it becomes better to build the permanent structure than something, but with the solution we've got, you have quite a degree of flexibility to expand and contract according to success.
Hi Eric, Mark. This is you may have partially answered this one already. This is a stadium and a budget question. How much pressure is the delays that you've eloquently outlined already putting on the ability of the club to be able to provide Neil with as competitive a budget as possible to play in League One for next season and beyond?
No, I haven't partially answered that before. A lot. It's actually not so much that, in that, for example, I don't know, 18 months ago when we looked at funding, we knew we could raise enough money to pay for the stadium. We looked at funding now, we can still raise enough money to pay for the stadium. 18 months ago, the operating budget in the new stadium could pay the interest on the loan. It still can. So to that extent, that hasn't changed. What is changing is there's money to be spent between now and the new stadium opening on things like, just imagine our turnover will probably be double. We'll have an entirely catering facility and function and banqueting facility as opposed to the hospitality on a match day here and the occasional things we can do here. That's an entirely new business. We'll need to recruit a catering manager or make a decision to outsource it, but even then we'll have to manage it internally. We're going to have to think differently about marketing, we'll have to think differently about operations, probably, and you're going to need an operations director separate from the club secretary, which I talked to David about. He's very comfortable with that because the jobs will both be that much bigger. So there's money to be spent getting people ready, because you can't just walk into a new stadium on day one and say, right, let's go. And that's going to be quite a drain on us. Plus, we're investing already in things like CRM, which is customer relationship management, which is a way of saying we actually will have a proper database of everybody we interact with, who buys things from us, who comes to games, all that sort of stuff, that we can contact people better. We're spending money on that. We've expanded the office staff already for being in League One. There are other things that Neil wants to improve, things like improved training facilities. There is significant pressure on us in the coming year. What we've always done is said, if we make a profit in 1 year, we're quite content to make a loss the next, as long as the loss isn't bigger than the profit. By and large, that's where we'll be heading, but we will also be looking for other ways of raising more money for the coming year, because it is going to be difficult, and the year after it's going to be equally difficult, or more so. But do I think we'll be there? We'll be fine? Yes, but we will probably be ratcheting up the Wimbledon fund again and other sources of trying to raise some more money. Difficult, but Matt wants to add something. Good, a new voice.
Not quite. So that was the first question that wasn't really about the new stadium. So given we got to 9:25, what I was going to do now was say, we're going to open out now to questions on any subject. If you've got something you really wanted to ask about the stadium, you still can. The guys are still here. But if you want to raise out anything else of any of the Don Trust board members and or anything else about the club with Eric here, then please do. And it's Ian first, so no doubt that'll be for Eric.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we've considered having the necessary cabling installed for the television companies. Because I know that Brighton and Hove Albion had it installed when they set the stadium up, and if you notice how many times they're on television, I'm sure they probably pay for it about 4 times over every season.
Andrew?
Cheers, Eric. The way it normally works is that we provide the cable routes for the television companies, and they come along with their cables because they want their cables to be used, and they thread them through and connect them. In theory, they then take them away at the end of the match, but if you're in a position like Brighton are, where you're on TV on a regular basis, what most of the companies now do is they leave the cables there. So there's no outside broadcast unit at one end and a camera at the other, but the cable's still there. Our job is to make sure that the cable route is provided from the broadcast centre to where they will film it from. So yes, we will provide them with the route. Generally speaking, they will come along with the cables, and if we're playing well enough, they'll leave them there. So, no pressure on Neil then.
All right, are we done?
Now George has walked nearly that far.
The building that's on the bottom left, which I think you call Conference... the bit closer to the road with the glass sides.
The event space, yeah.
Right. Can that take another floor, regardless of whether it can or not? Would the roof be strong enough for any statues that can't go outside?
Do you have any particular statue in mind? But, okay, let me explain. What you see here is the full extent of the event space in 20,000 capacity mode. We're only building about a little over half of it in phase 1, but that's still big enough for a 500-seat banquet facility. So this is an enormous space. It is a double height space, deliberately so. If you've got that many people in a room, you need a 5-6 metre height clear space, because otherwise it's too claustrophobic. The roof is not currently designed for putting anything on top, because that would add a significant amount of money to it, because it is a clear span space. We haven't got any interim columns there, it's just big open space, which is great from a commercial point of view, but it does make it very expensive if you want to put something on top. I'm not saying we haven't thought about it. We have thought, there have been ideas of putting commercial things on top, roof gardens on top, but the reality is, as of today, what we've got is a very good business plan solution in terms of a big open space with clear span.
Ian, for the gentleman at the front with his statues, if the shop is big enough, if the club shop is big enough, we'll sell a few in there, you can take them home with you.
You won't fit in my car.
Take it on the train then.
Yeah, Ian, what you want to do is get the mannequins to display the clothing to be ex-players. That will solve a lot of problems.
Is the shop going to be big enough for mannequins?
Next question.
No.
There's been some rumours around about some of our youngsters going on, specifically Joe Bursick and Tueosi Lasagna. Can you give us an update on what their situation is and whether we're liable to get any cash for them?
Yeah, Joe Bursick, for those of you who don't know, is the England under-17 goalkeeper. He played, they got the final and lost on penalties in the European Championship, UEFA. That age group has seemed to be a bit of a golden year by the people who run the England team, so he's done very well. If you look at the team that started the final, 9 were with Premier League clubs, 1 was with a club that became a Premier League club a few days later, Newcastle, and Joe. It's not surprising when Joe mixes with people from Premier League clubs, when other clubs are there scouting and watching, because they have to be pretty well, that they start looking at Joe and thinking, well, would he be, he's the best at that age in the country, should he be joining them? So we know there's a lot of interest in him. We have had people approach us about it. There's no deal signed for him to go, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he did. To put this into context, without talking about specific figures, you may have seen that recently it was announced that we had a tribunal about the transfer of the England under-19, to be fair, second choice goalkeeper, Will Mannion, who plays in all their friendlies but not the competitive games, to Hull. And that went to tribunal and we got £100,000 for a lad who was, I think, 18 at the time he transferred. You'd expect to get more for an under-17 boy, because the reason we got 100,000 for Will was that he was effectively out of contract, and the nearest equivalent I can give you, it's not a very good equivalent, is just a bit like a Bosman deal. He can go, you can't stop him. If he does go, the other club has to pay you, and if you can't agree how much it is, it goes to tribunal. And because he's not under contract, you're likely to get rather less. When you've got a boy who's under contract as a scholar, as all the players are, let's move it away from Joe, but all the academy boys are, then if you want them, you have to effectively pay a bit extra to get them out of contract. So if you didn't get more for a 17-year-old England goalkeeper who's contracted than for a 19-year-old who'd seen out his contract, as players can, then you'd not be doing very well. So you'd expect to get more. That's about as much I'll say about the amounts. Toyosi has been released by the club. He's been on trial at various clubs, and none of them, to the best of my knowledge, has offered him anything. We aligned him with another club to go to, but he chose not to. We'll see where he ends up. He was loaned out, he was coached and loaned out. Eventually he was loaned out to Kingstonian. And I'm not mocking the kid, but he wasn't able to get into the Kingstonian team. It's a bit of a surprise to everybody that bigger clubs have been looking at him. We'll see what happens. If he does go, we will get no money from him because we released him. And you say that's a decision made jointly by the first team manager, the academy, head of academy, and the senior academy coach. It's not a board decision, it's not a football decision. It is a football decision, not a board decision.
Eric, just to say on that banqueting facility, will it be ready for June 2019? If so, the All England Club are always looking for facilities. And I'm sure that would come in very handy.
It won't be big enough to play tennis in, Dennis.
No. For banqueting.
I know. Subject to being able to get into it, which, and that's not meant facetiously, I think it ought to be finished before the pitch is ready. We'd expect that out. I mean, actually what Andrew said, the stadium will be finished and then we'll do the fitting out, so it ought to be ready before then. Whether the access to it will be ready, I don't know, but if it's ready, then we should start letting it out, and we'll be approaching anybody who we think might be interested. There's all sorts of major events that take place, whether they be conferences, for example. Certain Asian weddings in particular tend to have huge numbers. So it'll be particularly attractive. There is nowhere, to the best of my knowledge, in Milton with anywhere near the scale and size of this. And it'll be brand new, and it'll have a lovely view of a football pitch, or in the first stage, a lovely view of a football pitch being constructed. So yeah, we can talk to them. Yeah. And it should be more than ready for June. Early in 2019, we'd hope. Are we done?